Chapter 7. Message spreads. Mum, I don't want to go. I can't manage the shopping all by myself. Danny's going to be with you, Lydia protested. Why do you need me as well? Lydia, I've had enough of this. Go and put your coat on and wear your trainers or your boots. It's slippery outside. Lydia scowled at her mum. She recognised that tone of voice. Her mum had made up her mind, and nothing short of a ton of Semtex would shift her now. Lydia turned her head to stare back out of the window. The road and the pavement glistened like glass from the severe overnight frost. High above, grey clouds were beginning to sweep across the sky. Lydia sighed. All she wanted to do was watch the world go by from the front room window. Why couldn't everyone just leave her alone? Lydia, move. Now, Mum said angrily. But someone from my class might see me, Lydia whispered. So what? You didn't do anything to be ashamed of, Mum said. How many times must I tell you? Hold your head high and don't let anyone make you feel ashamed of something you haven't done. Lydia sighed deeply as she uncurled her legs from beneath her and stood up. She looked at her mum again, making a silent appeal. Hurry up, Lydia. I don't want to spend my entire Saturday stuck in the supermarket, Mum said. So much for that. Lydia looked down at Danny, who lay flat out on his stomach in front of the television. He was playing with his latest football game. Danny, go and put your shoes on. You can't go shopping in your slippers, Mum said. Danny pressed the pause button. Can't I just finish? No, you can't, Mum exploded. You children are driving me up the wall and onto the roof. Now I want both of you in the car in 1 minute. And with that, Mum marched out of the room. Since last week, everyone's been so grouchy, Danny complained. Snap, 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 all the time. And it's all my fault. Go on, say it, Lydia said furiously. Well, excuse me all over the place. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Don't snap at me as well. Sorry, Danny, Lydia dragged the words out. I should think so too, Danny sniffed. I don't care what anyone else says, Liddy. I know you didn't do anything wrong. Lydia smiled. Before Danny realised what she had planned, she kissed him on the cheek. Ugh, yuck! Danny rubbed his cheek vigorously. I'm going to have a whole lot of spots there tomorrow. Are you nuts? I must be to kiss my baby brother, Lydia said sourly. Danny and Lydia glared at each other until their lips started to twitch. Then they both started laughing. Lydia pushed lightly against Danny's left shoulder. Danny pushed her back. They both smiled. Come on, we'd better go before Mum goes into orbit, said Lydia. After putting on their trainers, coats, scarves, hats and gloves, they both left the house in silence. Lydia emerged from the car like a snail from its shell. She looked around, her teeth clamped together so tightly that her jaw ached. The car park was almost full with people milling around everywhere. The supermarket was at the edge of town, very close to the moors. Thanks to the traffic, it had taken them ages to get there, at least 15 minutes. But Lydia wished that the journey could have lasted until everything was closed. The supermarket was usually only 6 or 7 minutes' drive from the house, and Lydia's mum wasn't exactly a Sunday driver. According to Dad, she was more of a speed demon. Ever since she and Dad had bought their brand new car a couple of months before, there'd been no stopping her. Lydia looked around the car park to the moors. Although dull grey clouds filled the sky above the shops and houses, the sky over the moors blazed pink and orange. The colours moved around each other in a slow, fluid dance. Lydia felt a peculiar prickling sensation at the back of her neck. She rubbed her nape as she stared at the strange sky. She felt oddly attracted to the sight, and yet, at the same time, it gave her a queasy feeling in the pit of her stomach. Someone laughing nearby brought Lydia out of her daydream. She hastily looked down. Don't let anyone see me from school, please. Maybe, if she'd said it enough times, it would come true. Another fun-packed Saturday getting crushed in Sainsbury's, Mum grumbled. Moments later, she passed the food trolley to Lydia and they all entered the supermarket. Danny, just behave yourself, okay? I don't want any of your nonsense today, Mum said. But I haven't done anything, Danny protested. Let's just keep it that way, shall we? Mum said. Is that fair or what? Danny huffed. I'm being told off and I haven't even done anything. Danny muttered under his breath for at least an hour and a half. For the first couple of hours, Lydia hardly dared to look up. Everyone would be looking at her. They would all know what she was supposed to have done. Don't look up, Lydia. Then you won't have to face anyone. You won't have to see the word in everyone's eyes, on everyone's faces. Thief. Liddy, have you got a headache? Is the light hurting your eyes? Danny whispered. No, why? You keep looking down, Danny said. Shut up and leave me alone, Lydia hissed. They turned down the third aisle full of slices of bloody beef and chilled lamb and cooked chickens, all wrapped in polystyrene and cellophane. And then Lydia saw her, Anne, with her mum. The only sound in the whole of the supermarket was Lydia's blood roaring through her body. She stared, horror-stricken. It took a few moments for Anne to realise that she was being watched. Her head turned and her eyes met Lydia's. As Lydia watched, Anne's eyes narrowed and a tiny smile played over her lips. Lydia lowered her head immediately, every atom of her body on fire. Mum, I don't feel well. Can I go sit in the car? Lydia whispered. With a frown, Mum placed a hand on Lydia's forehead. You don't have a temperature, she said. I feel terrible, please. No, I don't think so. Breathing in this recycled air conditioning is a lot healthier than breathing in carbon monoxide fumes in a car park, Mum said firmly. Mum, Anne Turner from my class is in front of us. Please let me leave, Lydia pleaded. No, I'd say all the more reason to stand your ground, Mum replied. And that was the end of that. Lydia had no choice but to keep pushing the trolley. She kept her eyes on her hands in front of her. Mum, that's the girl I was telling you about, Anne said. That's the thief? There was no way everyone in the aisle didn't hear Anne. Feeling sick, Lydia looked around. Everyone was looking at her. Anne's mum pulled her daughter away from Lydia as if she thought she was being a supposed thief was contagious. Don't you dare call my sister a thief, Danny said furiously. His voice was even louder than Anne's. Lydia wanted to crawl into the nearest hole and never come out again. Danny, that's enough, his mum said. But she said, I'm well aware of what she said, Mum interrupted. Mum turned to Anne's mum. Mrs. Turner, my daughter isn't a thief. I suggest you tell your daughter to get her facts straight, Mum said, adding under her breath, and teach her some manners while you're at it. Anne's told me all about your daughter, Anne's mum said pointedly. The cup has been at that school since I was a girl. She had no right to take it. Lydia didn't take it. Lydia's mum spoke even more quietly than before. In fact, your daughter was hit with her the night the cup went missing. Mrs. Turner turned and frowned to Anne. Is that true? No, Mum, Anne replied immediately. Lydia's just trying to wiggle off the hook and put me on it instead. That's a lie. You were with me that night, Lydia gasped. I wasn't. You're just a liar as well as a thief, Anne said viciously. My daughter is neither of those things, Lydia's mum denied. If you say so, said Anne's mum. Come on, Anne, we have shopping to buy. And just what does that mean? Are you insinuating something? Lydia's mum asked. Mum, let's go. Please, let's go, Lydia implored. The decision to get away was taken out of Lydia's hands. Mrs. Turner took Anne firmly by the hand and practically dragged her away. Scalding hot tears burned a trail down Lydia's cheeks. She looked around. The eyes of everyone in the aisle were on her. The security camera at the end of the aisle, past the checkout counter, was trained on her. The whole world had a pair of eyes. Mum, can I sit in the car, please? No. I hate you, Lydia hissed at her mum. I hate you. And I'll never forgive you. That's enough, Lydia, Mum said quietly. Beside Lydia, Danny started to sniff. Slow, embarrassed tears that he couldn't control slid down his cheeks. It's okay, Danny, I'm sorry, don't cry. Lydia put her arm around her brother's shoulder. I'm not crying. Danny wiped his tears with the back of his hand. They carried on walking down the aisle. Lydia looked at her brother. Even if no one else did, Danny believed in her. Not in the way that Dad did, by believing that no daughter of his could have done such a thing. No, Danny really and truly believed that she, Lydia, hadn't stolen the cup. And Lydia needed that more than anything else. As they queued at the checkout counter, Lydia smiled tentatively at Danny. He smiled back. They didn't need to do or say anything else. Lydia? At the sound of her name, Lydia's head whipped around. She couldn't believe it. Frankie, Lydia said, stunned. Hello, Lydia. Frankie smiled uncertainly. How are you? I'm okay, Lydia said. Why was Frankie asking? She didn't care. She hadn't once said a word to Lydia over the last week. Not one. I just wanted to say, I know you didn't take the cup. Oh yeah? What's changed your mind, Francis? Lydia asked, her eyes blazing. She used Frankie's real name deliberately, wanting to give back just a little bit of the hurt she was feeling, even if it just was a little. Lydia, I'm on your side. Are you, Francis? Could have fooled me, Lydia said, turning away from her. Look, can we... Frankie got no further. Frankie, I didn't know you were here. Appearing as if from nowhere, Anne linked arms with Frankie, ignoring Lydia and her family completely. Come and say hello to my mum. Frankie allowed Anne to lead her away. She turned her head to look back at Lydia, frustration written all over her face. Lydia, that wasn't very nice, Mum said quietly. What wasn't? Cutting her dead like that. Frankie obviously wanted to talk to you. She was trying to be friendly, which is more to the point than can be said for the other one, Mum pointed out. Well, I didn't want to talk to her. Don't be too proud to let her be your friend, Mum warned. I hate her. And Anne and everyone else in that rotten school. Now, Lydia. I don't want to talk about it, said Lydia stubbornly. She wished her mum would just drop the subject. Mum took her head but took the hint and said nothing. I'm your friend, Liddy, Danny whispered. Moments passed before Lydia spoke. Do you know something, Danny? In this whole stinking town, you're the only true friend I've got, she replied. Lydia, that's enough. I'm sure you'll find a way of showing everyone that you didn't. Don't start that again, Mum, Lydia interrupted. It doesn't matter, not anymore. Danny's the only friend I've got, and he's the only friend I want. Lydia turned to where Frankie stood with Anne and her mum. Something inside her curled up into a very tight, painful knot, and sat like a rock in her stomach. Lydia clenched her fists. I'll get my own back on you, Anne, and you, Frankie. If it's the last thing I do, I swear I will, she said slowly, and she meant it.